Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Trujillo, and I'm the Access and Discovery Librarian at the University of Colorado Boulder. But I'm also the current chair of the Summon Working Group, and it is on behalf of that group that I am delighted to welcome you today to our first Summon customer webinar. I'm joined today by Amy Fry, who's the e-resources librarian at Bowling Green State University, and Brian Holda, who's the digital services librarian at Davenport University. And they're going to be presenting on the overall topic of their Summon interface configurations. So before we begin, one reminder, this is actually part of a three-part series, and you can sign up for our upcoming webinars that are listed on this screen on the Summon webinars page. So welcome, and now I will turn it over to Amy to start her presentation on boosting resource visibility.
So thank you so much for being here. What I want to talk about today is using a specific summon configuration customization called custom right-hand panels. And I'm going to show you how we do that to draw attention to diverse content or maybe overlooked content that can help people when they're doing research. So this is a customization that Summon released in November of 2017. And it gives us the ability to create custom panels that will display on the right-hand side of the Summon results screen. I thought this enhancement, and here I'm just showing you a screenshot of a couple of these and where they show up in our results. So I thought this enhancement, when it was released, gave us a unique opportunity to guide users to resources that might not rise to the top in Summon search results for whatever reason, or to steer users to valuable resources for popular search topics. I also wanted whatever we added in this part of the Summon results screen to be closely tied to the research process and add value to a researcher's use of Summon and what they were using it for. So I looked at our popular searches report in the Summon admin module and created stickies that would do this, and that's what I call our custom right-hand panels. I call them stickies that would do this for some of the terms our users search for the most frequently. And we have stickies that showcase statistical resources like Statista and government documents. So these are some of those. We also have ones that highlight reports from CQ Researcher or from NGOs or other reports. And we also have stickies for some special topics. So we have a Find a Lyric Poem assignment that we get every semester. So I have a sticky for that. And also we offer individual research appointments and especially want to encourage people to take advantage of those during times of the semester when research is really heating up for students. So we have that sticky displaying right now, but we don't always have it up there. So to make these panels, I first had to find out what our users were searching for. And I'm going to walk you through this process step by step with screenshots, and my slides will be available after on the recording and also for you to look at after this in case you want to go through these step by step later yourself. But I found that though the upgraded analytics for Summon are very powerful, using them successfully had a really steep learning curve for me. I don't know if some of you can relate to that. So I'm going to walk you through this process to find your popular searches report. So of course you start at the Summon admin console and click on usage at the top in the navigation bar. Once you've connected to the stats database, you have to navigate to the reports under shared folders. And once you do this one time, this option will always show up for you again until you change it. So it's really getting to that on the left nav bar the first time. That's maybe a little confusing. You have to go through all those folders to get to those shared reports. And then you will see the popular searches report. The report says that it's giving us popular searches since January 1st, 2016, but actually it's giving us popular searches from the last 7 months, and it's the 500 most popular searches. So you can change these parameters if you want to by clicking on the criteria tab and hovering over your search criteria there in the SQL interface to edit each one. And once you get those criteria changed to what you want them to be, you can rerun the report. And I changed mine to the top 5,000 searches, not because I was going to go through all of those, obviously, from the last 12 months, but because I wanted to sort of search and find variations of what people were searching for, and not just look at the top ones, but use keyword searching to collate ones, and you can see that some will actually be more than just one line item. And that'll help to give you the keywords also that people are using when they're finding things. So this is what ours looked like after I reran it and then exported it. Our top search every year is always our fight song lyrics. I don't know why. I think this is maybe some kind of orientation activity, and I yeah, I don't have a sticky for that. Other popular search terms are always the names of our most popular databases. So you can see Canopy, JSTOR, EBSCO in there. And I don't make stickies for those as a general rule also because I like to keep my database recommender up to date and make sure databases are showing up with their descriptions in the database recommender. So that's a different customization that I use to make sure that a keyword search for a database name will always make the database appear at the top of the screen. Instead, I really try to focus on the topical searches that are coming up in this search report. So things like climate change, world hunger, servant leadership, cyberbullying, and these obviously change from year to year, right? So taking a look at these once a semester and trying to customize someone to respond to them is what I try to do. So like I said, you can see in the top 15 searches, world hunger shows up twice. So it's not just getting 123 searches in the time period, it was getting almost twice that. So this is what I was mentioning about getting more search results than just the top 500 and doing some keyword searching in Excel to sort of find out what those really most popular searches are. So to create a sticky, I'm going to go to Pages, go back to the Summon Admin module and go to Pages, and you will find there's a WYSIWYG there that you can use to create a custom panel. A WYSIWYG, if you don't know the term, means what you see is what you get, and it allows you to make content for the web without having to know all the HTML code that you would need to know. I find the WYSIWYG in this part of Summon to be a little bit lacking. So I like to use Lib Guides to create my stickies. Lib Guides is something a lot of people have access to, but you can use anything that will allow you to code in HTML like Dreamweaver or Blogger software, whatever you have access to. And I find a Creative Commons licensed image on Flickr, or I will use an image from a vendor, like one of their marketing images, to make my sticky stand out when it's there on the right-hand side. And then also put in whatever links I want to put in and keywords there. And I do like to have fun with this. If you can see on the left-hand side, the last sticky I made was for helping people through an error using a common resource that we had. So I used a kitten because everybody loves kittens, and nobody once said, "Hey, why is there a kitten in Summon?" So I think people were fine with that. I'm having a little bit of fun with the Summon interface. So once I get my sticky all designed, I go back to the source code and copy all the HTML out of LibGuides, and then back in Summon paste it into where the WYSIWYG in Summon will take the HTML. So then I save it, And then I can start adding tags. So the tags are what will make the sticky come up when people are searching for those words. So again, I try to find all the words in our popular searches report that people are using to describe what I want this sticky to come up with, and then I just add those as tags. And you can test your sticky right away because this is not a customization in Summon that you need to wait 24 hours or overnight to get it to show up. Actually, the stickies that you make show up right away. So that gives you the opportunity to correct anything that might be wrong and see how they're working and show them off to your colleagues because you're proud of what you made. So back in that Summon admin module, you can edit stickies. You can disable them if they're not relevant anymore. You can make them persistent. So you can see this is our individual research appointments sticky that I've made persistent for now. And then I'll change that after, once we get closer to the end of the semester. And then we also have a sticky that will pass searches through to the OhioLink catalog, which is our statewide catalog. And that one is always persistent for every search. You can use the settings for topics in the Summon admin module to help govern where your stickies show up on the right-hand panel. We have ours set to show up above the topic explorer. So that means it will show up before any encyclopedia content shows up from that might come into search results as a result of the topic explorer matches. But also you have to be aware that it will also make your stickies show up above your suggested Lib Guides and Librarians because suggested Lib Guides and Librarians are part of the topic explorer. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're deciding where you want those to be. And that's it. The last thing that I would really like to incorporate into my stickies is statistics. I have not thought of a good way to do that. It might be nice for Summon to make that available for everyone. And that's it.
First off, Amy, that was great. Thinking, oh, that was some really good stuff. I hope to incorporate. So, yes, my presentation is called "User Testing Your Way to a Better Summon Interface." I do come from Davenport University Libraries, and I want to explain some things we have done to improve the entire interface of Summon. So. Okay, so first, we wanted to understand what the users were doing and thinking directly. So it was a ballpark 400 users that we observed. This was over the course of 3 years, so it wasn't all at once. And we did things like talk aloud tests. A lot of people might be familiar with this. If you know Steve Krug, who does a lot of the usability, he talks about these kind of tests a lot. It's about a 30-minute session we would have with our users, and we would ask them different questions to create different scenarios where we want to see what they do and what are their skills or what are their thoughts going into something. So we usually do 5 different scenarios in those. But we also did one session, we did a class recording. This was great because there was a faculty member who said, hey, I know you're doing these one-on-one sessions. Would you want to do our entire class? And we said, of course, that's great. So that was a ballpark of 10 to 15 students, and we had them all record what they did, and it was kind of like the one-on-one talk alouds, but we had 15 all at once do it. So that's another example of the feedback we got. We also did something called guerrilla tests. Some of you may have heard of this, but essentially think of the talk aloud test where you have 5 different tasks that they're doing and they're talking through. The guerrilla test is more, they will do 1 or maybe 2 tasks. So it ends up being more 5 to 10 minute sessions as opposed to a whole 30-minute session. So we did lots of that. And then we actually had the most of these users here were came from what's called full story, and this is we only are using the free version. Be great to have the paid version. It's just a quite a steep curve for us to get that, but in the free version of full story, they do provide video playback of the website you put it on. So we put this full story recording, it's just a quick code you use, and we put it onto Summon. And so what it allows us to do is we could watch users. And since it's the free version, we don't have a ton of data on this, but we were able to get 24 hours of data to just watch users trying to find things. It's great because they're in their complete natural, normal environment, looking and trying to, find things they want. The disadvantage to this versus the other testing we did was we had to just surmise from their screen what they were looking for. We didn't feed them the questions to look for. But all four of these combined, I think, gave us some really good insights into what our users actually are doing using Summon. So when we did the talk alouds, and the guerrilla testing, the ones where we could feed them the scenarios, we would ask things like this. And this is a word for word scenario we've given multiple users. Your nursing assignment is to find one peer-reviewed article on anesthesia written within the last 3 years. Open up the first page of such an article. You'll notice we said nothing about Summon, nothing about actually, we don't even call it Summon, we call it the library search box, but we said nothing about that either. Because we wanted to make it as realistic as possible, because the user is not coming saying, where do I find Summon? They don't even know Summon exists. They're saying, how do I find my research? Another example was this. Your business assignment is to find an article related to social media in the Journal of Marketing. In a new tab, use the DU Library website to open up such an article. So those are just some examples of scenarios we did. Again, we're not asking anything about Summon, but we want to see what are the behaviors and the habits they do with these kind of scenarios. Okay, so from that, there were tons of observations. I actually went through a list just related to Summon. We've done this with other library products too, but for Summon, I don't remember how many, but maybe 20 or 30 observations. But I wanted to focus on 3 in particular that we kept seeing over and over. One was we saw our users would gloss over the filters, the side panel on the left. Multiple times it was like they didn't know that existed. Another thing was they had trouble searching journals. Specifically searching within journals. So if we said you're looking for the Journal of Business Ethics or something like that, and try to find an article, they didn't quite see how to do that multiple times. And then another thing that was maybe a little surprising was that they had trouble returning to the library homepage when we had them in Summon. And again, this we would notice when we did multiple tasks or scenarios. So we would ask them a question that involved them using Summon, and then they would need to go back to the library homepage, for instance, and they didn't know how to go back. They didn't know how to navigate back. They would click around, they keep hitting the back button, but as anyone knows who's done a in-depth search on Summon, you keep hitting back over and over and over, you can't go back, so they got stuck sometimes. Okay. So now those were the problems, and here were some of the solutions we came up with here. First off, if you remember, one of the problems was they would gloss over the filters. And this is what it looked like before we did any changes on it. And this is what it probably looks like for the majority of Summon users, kind of the out-of-the-box look. And we changed that in some subtle ways. And you'll notice for all of these changes, we do kind of have the philosophy of if we can make a difference, the more subtle, the better. And so we are, you can do major interface changes, but again, I'm quoting from Steve Krug, who does a lot of usability. He says that if you can do it very small changes and get what you want, go with that first. So that's what we did here. And here's a little of how we did that. This is CSS. I'm assuming limited or no understanding of CSS in this presentation. For those who do know CSS, you probably notice right away this isn't fully correct the way I have it laid out here. I just wanted to very simplify and strip down the CSS so we could understand it. But at the end of this presentation, I do have a link to the complete code we use to make it up and running on your own site. But here are the changes we made. First, in the headers, the font size, we increased the font size a little bit. We added some padding around it, so it had just a little bit of spacing. And then we made the color a little darker, you'll see. And then with the links underneath each header, we indented them a little bit. So I don't know if you can see with, or you might notice with your eyes just kind of looking at it, your eyes kind of, it's tough. It's a cognitive overload to look at links all lined up at the left like that. You just feel like, where do I even start? But when you have a little indent, it kind of chunks it appropriately. And then also for the sections, we did a border at the bottom. So you see that slight line at the bottom of each section, a little bit of padding and a little bit of margin there. As well. And so it just helps your eyes, it helps people kind of understand it a little bit better. We made that change and we did more user testing and we noticed they got it. They started to notice those things on the left. Okay, so let me show another example here. This is with the problem, if you remember, searching within a specific journal. So we would say, look for, article in the Wall Street Journal, which is a very typical assignment they'll get on our campus. And so they would come to the page, and this is what it looked like before we made any changes. And then, but sometimes, and I know from this little snap here or screenshot, you might say, well, it's right there, but you remember they're looking at the whole interface, and for whatever reason, they missed that link right underneath the search box. So we changed it. Again, a very subtle change. We just added a faint kind of border around it. And, well, actually, let me show you here the CSS. We added the a slight border around it and then just gave it a little bit of margin on the top. So you can see it has a little spacing from that search box, just enough to make it pop a little bit and stand out. And again, we got to see some improvements after doing that. Okay, let's go to the next. The last problem, if you recall, that we noticed, and this was one of those head scratchers we didn't realize at first, but we kept seeing it happen, that they would come to the page and we'd say, okay, now here's your next scenario, and they would try to go back to the library homepage. They didn't know what to do. Some clicked on the logo there, Davenport University Libraries, so they got that, and but some still kind of were confused. So we made a slight change, and this is breadcrumbs that we added here. And these breadcrumbs specifically match the header and the breadcrumbs that are used on all of Davenport University pages. So, well, actually, I'll show you a little bit more later, but let me show you the code before I get into this. Okay, so this is actually JavaScript code. And again, like the CSS, I'm giving a very stripped down, simplified version. So if you just copy and pasted that, it wouldn't work. But at the end of this, I'll show the code for the entire JavaScript that will make it work. But to get to the essentials of what we did, we created the breadcrumbs, and then we had the, excuse me, we created basically the HTML for the breadcrumbs. So that's there. And so we had this HTML, you just have to create it in the JavaScript, and then we just told it where to go, right? So we said, okay, put that HTML, the breadcrumb HTML, right at the beginning of the header of Summon, and we did that. There were a few other style changes we had to make in the CSS to make it flush, and again, that's all at the end of this in the code. But those were the changes, and this was maybe the most dramatic of all changes, in my opinion, of what we did. Well, I don't know, maybe the filters on the left, that was a pretty good dramatic change, but this one I have seen zero people have any struggles to get back to the library page with just that little breadcrumb, and it just gives that nice visual cue. Even if they don't use it, it just reminds them, oh yeah, this is a Davenport page. Okay, I kind of know where I'm at, and they don't have that extra cognitive overload at the beginning. Okay, so kind of in total here, you can see this is what more or less what our summon page looked like before the changes set in. And then here it is with the changes. Excuse me, quick. Okay, so some of the changes that you'll see, we talked about, right? The on the left panel, this is a little more spaced out, indented. It just for your eyes, and a nice test for your own user interface. It's kind of the squint test they talk about, where you squint at a page and like how do you view it, how do you see it? And so even a squint test shows you, okay, this tells you there's some categories here that it doesn't feel as overwhelming as a big list. And then here it pops a little bit at the top, the search within the journal. We did change the search, the color of the magnifying glass to search it. And again, that was just to match what they were used to on our library homepage, because we want to eliminate that cognitive overload as much as possible, so they don't feel like they have to learn a whole new interface, but it has a nice feel and cadence that is very similar to our other pages. And then, of course, the breadcrumbs at the top, like we talked about, are there. And so those are some changes, some pretty subtle changes that we did. And there are a few others too, but it shows a little of our thinking and how to put all these things together. So, okay. The code in these slides will be shared with you later as well. But that is the code to see all of the changes, the complete CSS and JavaScript of the 3 changes that I just talked about. And that's good. And so
now it's time for questions. Please put in the chat box your questions for either presenter or both presenters, and Scott will kind of facilitate that.
Perfect. First, we'll deal with some questions that came in for Amy. The first question that I have for Amy is it possible to have these changes based on the language of the interface? For example, we want our English custom panels to show up when the summon interface is in English, but not for other languages.
That's a great question. So it's not, I don't think it's very, it goes beyond what the tag, you can only customize what shows up based on hide, unhide, persistent, not persistent, and tags. So if you were assuming that people using the Spanish interface were searching in Spanish, you could have all your tags for Spanish panels, Spanish words, and then only people searching in Spanish would see Spanish panels. But I mean, I don't think that that's probably how people really use summon. So I don't think it's sophisticated enough to do that 100% of the time with non-English language panels.
Okay, another question that I received, have you received client feedback? Have stickies made it easier for people to find what they're looking for?
I have received feedback on the Ohio link sticky that shows up all the time and passes your search terms through to Ohio link. And that is the only specific one I've ever heard about. That's why I really want those stats so that I can see if people are noticing them and clicking through to things.
Okay, this question is for Brian. Would the slight modifications made by Davenport University be something that could be implemented globally as part of a summon release? That's, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that question, but I can't speak on behalf of product management. But if you do want to have something like that done, I would suggest suggesting an idea to the idea exchange or providing some feedback to Brent Cook, our Director of Product Management. Brian, can you reshare your slides with the code? There was a gray box blocking them. So if you want to go back to a couple of your slides, a chat seemed to pop up and gray out a portion of your slides. So
I saw that too, and I wasn't sure if you saw it on your screen. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's the primary one that was affecting. Here's a question for you, Brian. When you updated the code, were you able to see the change in summon immediately, or did you have to wait for the server to refresh? And was there a way to test or preview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and I explained this in the code at the end that the way we do it, someone gives you the Java a URL to place your JavaScript, and so from the JavaScript file, you have to actually create a CSS link, and I show how to do that. And so then I have on our server, we have the two files, JavaScript and CSS, and so Summon basically every time it loads, it's pulling from whatever the updated file is on our server, the JavaScript file, and then the JavaScript, you know, is making the CSS. So it pulls from those two files. So any changes we make, it's as long as it takes to, you know, upload a new file on the server, and sometimes some caching might take place, but that isn't as related to Summon, so it doesn't take too long at all to see those changes, maybe 5 minutes. The testing of those changes is a little trickier. I try to do it in the when Summon has the oh, what do you call it? Like you have the kind of the preview or the staging to test things before things go live. That's a good time for me to try some of those. So some of those I store for that if I'm afraid it's going to make some major changes. And then another thing is I use the inspect element a lot via Chrome, and so I make some changes there, especially to the CSS file. You can change it right directly and see how that looks there. For JavaScript is a little trickier, but there is an extension I've used, and I don't recall the name, but it allows you again to see changes in the JavaScript directly that I would only see on my website and no one else would see. So I've used the inspect element. I've used the kind of the staging environment that you get 2 weeks before a release, and that's how I do it. And then sometimes I do just try it live, but especially if I know there's no risk at, you know, major changes happening.
Okay, here's another question for you, Brian. Can you talk a little bit about how you recruited participants for your user research?
Yeah, great question. We have multiple ways of doing that. We have done the traditional university communications channel, and so we do it via email or they put out these little like marketing messages, and so we do those things. We also found success with putting just temporarily, we'd put it on our homepage, like a little ad almost to say, hey, you know, use our website, get a gift. And then they would click it and could sign up there. That's helped for the most of it. But then for the guerrilla testing that I talk about, where you just do 1 or 2 people, I will go. And I heard this from another library that does this. Said just get a whole big thing of king size candy bars, and that's what I do. Or full size, whatever size, just a nice thing of candy bars there, and maybe we'll make a little sign or a poster and say, give us 5 minutes of your time, we'll give you a candy bar or something like that. And that's been great. I go to like the cafe area, and so I haven't had problems in the last year since I've used those methods. At the beginning, it was a little tougher to get things rolling though.
Okay, next question is, Brian, can you reshare your slide for the search journal slide?
Yep, there it is.
There you go. Perfect. And it was brought up earlier about the upcoming webinars and the URL associated with that. So I'm going to push that in the chat box for everybody to see.
And again, if I could say, maybe people heard me on this, but don't just copy and paste the CSS right there. You'd want to use the code at the end if you want to do it in your site.
Okay, I'm going to check the chat and see if we have any other questions that have come in. No other questions have come in. So Nicola, do you want to take the ball here? I'll give you the ball and make some concluding remarks. And if we do get any other questions, I'll speak up. But otherwise, I think that we're pretty much done with the session.
Well, thank you everyone for joining today. I put up the presenters' contact information So please reach out to them if you have further questions. We will be sending out the slides and the recording to everyone who signed up, and also on some of the listservs, so you can pass these around, share ideas. And yeah, please come to the next two. I think our next one's in January. We'll be talking about analytics. Amy, there is a way you can track those boxes, and they'll be discussing it in that presentation. So please come to those. And thank you once again to our fabulous presenters. Really enjoyed that. And everyone have a great morning.